In order to qualify for a job as an abridger and producer of books on tape at Dove Audio, where Stefan Rudnicki worked, he gave me a book to abridge, telling me what the word count should be. As I started cutting what I thought to be extraneous material, I felt bad for the author of the book, who had no doubt painstakingly chosen every single word, with absolutely no intention of simply cutting to the chase, which was pretty much what I was doing. I handed in my abridgment to Stefan, and the next day he called to say that I'd passed the test and I'd got the job. Great. Dove Audio was located in the heart of Beverly Hills and was owned by former record producer Michael Vina and his actress wife Deborah Raffin. The receptionist Margaret Maldonado had previously been in a relationship with Jermaine Jackson for several years, and the two boys they'd produced together sometimes came into the office with her. They were probably aged 6 and 9 at the time, and they were very cute and so well behaved. Jermaine Jackson never came in, though. I had my own office with a window looking out towards the Hollywood Hills, so it wasn't bad at all. The money wasn't very good, though, and I was being paid the equivalent of my first paycheck with Barry Levinson 10 years previously. However, it was a job, and a very interesting one at that. I liked this new challenge of abridging so many different types of books. Then going into the studio to produce an actor reading the book was the highlight. I sat with the sound engineer outside the recording booth and listened closely through my headphones for mistakes the actor might make. It was also important that the last sentence and word on the page be spoken before the actor turned the page, so that the crinkle of the paper couldn't be heard. Often the actors reading the books would be those who were no longer active in television or film, whether because of their age or they were no longer as popular as they were. I had the great delight of working with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. on several books. He was well known for his leading roles in several old-time TV series, including 77, Sunset Strip, and FBI. He was not only handsome, but had a beautiful melodic voice, and he was a real gentleman. I was thrilled when I knew I was going to produce a book Mr. Zimbalist was reading, because he was always word perfect and such a pleasure to work with. I also worked with his daughter Stephanie, known for her role in Remington Steele. We'd actually worked together 17 years earlier on The Tempest at the Mark Taper Forum. I know it's going back a bit in my story, but that was my first introduction to Los Angeles. John Hirsch, who I worked with at the CBC in Toronto, directed the play with Anthony Hopkins in the lead and asked me to join him in LA because he was having problems with the star. Mr. Hopkins wasn't following John's direction and kept changing the blocking of scenes, which was very disruptive to the other actors, to say the least. Stephanie Zimbalist was playing the role of Miranda, the daughter of Hopkins' character Prospero. But John Hirsch was frustrated that Hopkins showed very little affection towards Stephanie's character. He asked me to find out why. As I bonded with Tony Hopkins over the fact that my mother was from the same part of Wales as he was, Glamorgan, I asked him about his issues with John. "Oh, he reminds me of my father. I could never do anything right for my father. Even to this day, he tells me, 'Boyo, why can't you get a real job instead of this acting lark?'" Eventually, I brought up the subject of his relationship with Stephanie in the role of Miranda. "Does she have BO or something?" I joked. "Sorry, Stephanie." "No, she reminds me of my daughter, and I'm afraid that if I hug Stephanie, I'll break down." It seems that he hadn't seen his daughter since she was a baby. Apparently he'd left her and his wife almost 10 years previously. Yes, Tony Hopkins was quite a complicated person with a few demons, which he actually talked about in several magazine articles. But what a wonderful actor. I talked with Stephanie's symbolist about her experience on The Tempest, and she pulled a face. Then said when she bumped into Tony Hopkins several years later, he apologised profusely for his erratic behaviour. She also said that John Hirsch had been the best director she'd ever worked with. She'd stayed in touch with him, even visiting him in Toronto when he was dying of AIDS. I worked with quite a few British actors, including Juliet Mills, sister of Hayley Mills and daughter of the renowned actor John Mills. Juliet was such a sweet person and perfect to record certain books of the Bible, which I hadn't abridged, I hasten to add. That would have been a difficult one, I think. One day, Stephanie Beecham, known for her work in Dynasty in America and Coronation Street in England, came in to record the unabridged version of Silas Marner by George Eliot. It was a story that I was very fond of, so I was looking forward to this session. However, from the moment this Stephanie stepped into the studio, it was pretty clear that she was in a bad mood. She was devoid of the usual pleasantries before we started work, and questioned whether her requested bottle of Evian water delivered by a PA was in fact Evian. I assured her it was. "It doesn't taste like it at all," she complained. When she finally seemed to settle and made herself comfortable in the recording booth, the sound engineer Doug and I breathed a sigh of relief. Then, when I asked Miss Beecham to repeat a line because it had sounded muffled, she protested. "I don't believe you. Let me hear it back." Doug rewound the tape, and sure enough, a couple of the words in a sentence were unclear. She gave a big sigh, and then re-recorded the offending sentence. A few minutes later, she turned one of the typewritten pages before finishing the last word on the page, creating a distinct crinkling paper sound. Again, I had to ask the rather imperious actress if she could please repeat the previous sentence. I was met with a few choice expletives and a denial that such a thing had occurred. The tape was replayed, and there was the paper sound on top of her spoken words. More swearing from Miss Beecham and frustration from Doug and myself before proceeding. I'm glad to say that she didn't make a lot of errors during this full day of recording Silas Marner, but whenever she did, she always challenged me. I must admit, I held my breath a couple of times, doubting myself and not wanting to annoy her further if I'd made a mistake. Thank goodness that didn't happen. Except it seems that I did greatly annoy her, but in another way. We'd just come back after lunch and continued with the recording. Everything seemed to be going well when suddenly there was an angry outburst from the actress. "Stop! Stop! Stop!" she yelled. Doug and I looked at each other somewhat perplexed. "What's wrong?" I asked. "It's your head and that curly hair bobbing. It's so distracting." With my headphones in place, I was hardly bobbing my head around while I followed along with the text she was reading, and occasional looks at Doug as he operated the control panel. But I had to apologise. "Sorry, I'll try to keep my head still." Because of her view into the studio from the recording booth window, obviously Doug and I couldn't show exactly how we were feeling about this sudden outburst. But we decided to take a 5-minute bathroom break so that we could both go outside and scream. Finally, the session was over, and almost half of the book had been recorded. This meant that Stephanie Beacham would need to come back to finish it. Oh, Doug and I shuddered at the thought. Fortunately for us, it wouldn't be for another 3 months, because she was going back to England to work on Coronation Street, the beloved and long-running soap opera. So at least we could recover before she returned. As you can imagine, Doug and I had a few unflattering descriptions for this particular actress. One word comes to mind. It rhymes with witch. Next time, we rarely know what's going on in the lives of others, so we should never judge a book by its cover. Thanks again for listening.